Welcome to the Houdini HOULY Challenge Series. So, SideFX is holding a 31-day challenge where artists create a piece per day based on a daily topic. I've decided to take on the challenge and record each day's work so that you can see the process. I'm doing this so that I can challenge myself, and I'd recommend that you do the same. So let's get straight into it. On to week 2. Week 2 is motion. And so this is day 5. Cross it off as we do around these parts. So that is wave. Now, I've already started this one, been going at it for a while. Decided to take a break from the simulations. These were all pretty hectic and time consuming and stressful because when you simulate, you're not sure if it's going to come out right. And then when you render, you're not sure if that motion is going to look good. So went for something that's easier to test and easier to just make look good. And that was the point of this one, to just make it look nice. Others were cool because the effects were interesting. You know, you can hide a lot of poor texturing and things behind effects. And so today I wanted to focus on just nice textures. And so what I have is an oscilloscope, and I just need to attach a bunch of Redshift materials. This was all textured in Substance. So we have a bunch of Substance textures. I can show you over here. Right over here, we have some UDIMs. And I'm going to take that, apply it to the oscilloscope. So an oscilloscope is used to measure electrical signal, if I'm not mistaken, and it shows us a wave. So the way that we're going to show wave is just with basic sine curves, right? We're just going to have a curve and we can play around with that on the screen of the oscilloscope. So over to the oscilloscope and give it its textures. I'm texturing this oscilloscope and I decide to place a camera. All of a sudden, Houdini decides it would be cool to place 1,800 cameras. It doesn't end. I have never seen this before. Ever. It's endless cameras.
Nice.
Right, so oscilloscope textured, you just saw it rendered just now. Let's take a look at it quick. Alright, so what we have is this glass on the front, and it has this diffuse grid on the front of it. So that means that behind it we have a sort of screen, and I want this to be one of the old school kind of retro oscilloscopes. So we're going to do like an LCD screen. You're going to be able to see the little blocks and things, and then transfer a curve onto that. And so that's how the wave will be transferred. So mini tutorial time. We have this grid over here. It's a big grid at the moment. I'm going to scale that down and then just move it over here, right behind our glass, right? And then just grow it a bit. So it fits nicely behind our glass. Cool. So with this grid, I'm going to need to increase the number of rows and columns. So I'll make like 500 by 500. So now, as you can see, we have lots of these little cubes, right? and maybe even fewer would be nicer. So 300 by 300. I'm also just going to move this grid a bit more. I want to make sure that it is completely covered by the screen and it itself doesn't have any gaps behind. So we'll just do that, scale it up slightly. Our grid is positioned at a particular place that we don't really know. So what I want to do is I want to promote the attribute of its position, right? So I'm going to promote its position. And this is a cool trick that I use quite often, where you promote the position of something so that you can find where it is in space. You can also use like center. I think there's an intrinsic attribute that you can use, but for some reason I like this because I just get it as an attribute and I can change the name. So put in P, convert it to a detail, change the name, and that can be midpoint, right? Simple. And then in here, we can find the midpoint. So now we say vector midpoint equals detail, and then we need to fetch that midpoint value. So that will be 0, midpoint. And then what we can do is we can just say at CD, and let's do v at CD, equals channel ramp. And above this, I'm going to need something to drive this ramp. So I'm going to say float sine value, and then float cosine value. So I don't actually know what the math is going to be yet. I haven't really thought about this. I would need the distance. Okay, so this is where the tutorial kind of falls apart because I'm freestyling this. So I don't know exactly what I'm doing yet. So don't follow along with me, but you can get the idea of what I'm doing. So I'm going to say vector sides equals v at p minus midpoint. Say sine value equals sine sides. I have no idea what that's going to look like, but we're about to find out. Actually, this will be distance, sorry. So distance between midpoint and v at p, comma, sine value. And let's see what that gives us. Float sine value equals sine of sides. It's not happy because this needs to now be a float, because distance just gives us a value between these two. So it's no longer vector, it's now like something like 1. Right? So I can activate that, and it's going to be sides times a frequency. So times 180. Okay, so now you can see it's making these like concentric circles. And I'm just going to hide other objects so that you can see. And let's also reverse our normals on this. Reverse, I think. Called reverse? Yeah, reverse. Okay, cool. So we have that, right? And I'm going to edit parameter interface, color, set this to color. So we'll have green over on that end and black over on this end. So it'll basically just be true or false eventually. So we have that. And to give you an idea of what this means for us, and call this screen out, right? We have one on the side over here. That was for a test. So we can actually call this one screen, or like LCD screen out. And then go over here into our materials. Then on the screen material, what we're going to have to do is bring in that CD attribute. So we can use an RS point attribute. This is for Redshift. So then you take your color and you can plug it into overall emission color and then give this an emission value, right? So now it should work, but I'm not certain. So let's take a look. Okay, so it's not working. It's because I didn't call in CD. Okay, so I'm being silly. You need to tell Redshift which attribute to bring in, of course, and then you can just refresh that. Yeah, okay. So there you can now see it. And if we put the glass cover over, that's what we have. That's not what we want. We just want a basic line, a curve. But you can start to get the idea. If we just go to our camera, I want to zoom in so I can show you exactly what's going on. I'm not trying to hypnotize you, don't worry. Okay, so as you can see, we have that, but I would like fewer points. So we'll do 100 rows and 100 columns. Let's see how that looks. And then we're going to have to change our color to a vertex attribute, or a primitive attribute. Close that, take a look at this. So we want each one to only have a single value. So we're going to have to promote, and every CD needs to be promoted from point to primitive, right? So you end up with that. So now if you take a look, before some points had like half green, half black, and now they have a single value. So now we have it like that. If we take a look in Redshift, I don't know if that will actually work because it's no longer a point attribute. It's now a primitive attribute, but we'll see. Okay, yeah, so it's not happy with that anymore. So we'll have to find a way to put that onto points. So the way that I'm going to fix this is by doing I think a facet will work. So this can make every point unique. So I say unique points, and then you can promote that back onto your points. So from primitive to point using CD. And yeah, so the reason that this works is because every point is now separate. Each primitive is now separate. So there's no shared points, right? And you can actually see this based on the number of points that we have. It goes from 10,000 to 39,204. That's just because every single block now has 4 points to it, as opposed to sharing points with its neighbors. So it can now have this nice, like, squared off color, which is really cool. And then the other thing that we want is we want to fit this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this between black and white. So just drop an attribute, and all we have to do at the end here is just say if v at cd dot, and then you could use any component because it's black and white, so all the components are the same. cd dot x greater than, and you can just choose a value, 0.1, v at cd equals 1, 1, 1. So let's choose a higher value, and then we'll just say else, make it black. v at cd equals 0, 0, 0. Then we can just play around with the threshold, right? So that's pretty cool. Now, if we had to test that out, you can imagine what that looks like, but I'm going to give this a color first. Let's say ram from attribute, CD. And now we can give it some other color, so we can make it green. So now, if we take a look, it should be quite cool. We'll be able to see the little blocks. And once again, I'm trying to render with Mantra. I keep doing this, right? Kind of cool. Now we have these nice little blocks, and the reason it looks blurry is because we have a roughness over this. So it's actually like very sharp. If you remove the glass cover, you can see it's these sharp little blocks. And if you want to make this even better, what you can do is make a distinction on the lines between these. And the other thing I'm going to do is make this matte. So I'm going to go to the materials, screen material over here. The other thing that I want to do is just separate these blocks a bit better. So we can go over to screen again. And I want to shrink down every one of these very slightly. So I'll just say for each connected piece. And if I'm not mistaken, it should have separate pieces. Yeah, so they're all separate. So that means I can transform and transform each one down as much as I want. And that's not working because they have to be shrunk down by their pivot. So $CEX, $CEY. And this is something that you'll do often, the CEY, CE, or CEX, CEY, CEZ thing. It basically just sets the pivot at the center of all the geometry. So now if we scale it down, it scales down around itself. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that grid. So we can just merge. I want that grid to also be in the back, right? So we can just plug this in over here and move it back a bit. So I'll just transform, move it back slightly, just so that it's not empty behind it. And once again, give that a color and make this one black. Cool. So now our little LCD screen is probably looking pretty cool. Open render view. Yeah. So now you can get the idea, right? So now I just need to make this so that it's a curve. But this is a really cool way to make this sort of LCD screen type thing. And like you could transfer an image onto this. So I just want to actually show you that quickly. Let's do a attribute from map. I can go and fetch a random image. I don't know what it's going to be. So let's just plug our grid into this so that I can see. Yeah, it's just that at the moment. Okay, let's see. What kind of random picture do I have? Users. Me. Pictures. Right. All my weird little pictures. Let's take... Now, do I do something memey or do I do something that looks cool? I'm really tempted to take the circle. Oh, we're taking this cat. Sorry. If you had to take this cat and then do your facet thing and the attribute promote. Okay, so then we can do that same for each connected thing. And then we can just copy this transform over, right? And if you take a look at this, you can make some good memes. There we go, true art. So let's get back to what we were doing before I got distracted. Go to the screen, remove all of the cat stuff, We're done with that. We need to go to making this wave. I'm going to now take an attribute wrangle, set it to detail, and do a bit of a quick line generation. So int point equals points, so there's the number of points I want, equals channel integer, and just give it some name points, right? And then we can say while, actually we can do this, we can say int I equals 0, while I less than points, add point. And for now we'll just do 0, 0, and you say I++, and close it off. So what that'll do for us, and we can just disconnect it, is it should create that many points for us, right? So it creates 8 points if we set that to 8. All it's doing is it adds a point into geometry stream 0 at position 0. So now we can actually mess around with position. So now we can say x, or rather float, so float, and we actually want to create this outside, although we don't have to. Float x equals 0. We can say x plus equals 0.1. And then we can say float y equals 0. And all we have to do in here is say y equals sine of x. And we can go ahead with that, increase number of points, and we'll have to set. So let's say vector pos equals set x comma y comma 0, and use that in our add point. So we just put pos. That should give us a curve. It's going to be quite big, so we can scale this down by reducing this value over here firstly. So we can do 0.001, and then also by reducing this total value. So we can just multiply this by 0.001. Oh, rather, actually a better way to do this would be to times this by 10 or so. That increases our frequency, and then all we have to do is reduce the y value, so divide that by 10. Right, so we end up with a much nicer curve. So you can add more points and you keep generating a curve. Cool. So what that does for us is we can then give that something like a color, make that white. We add it as white, so let's keep it as white. And then we can transfer. So instead of what we had before, we can now transfer that. So we transfer our color, and we'll need to move it to that position over there. So we know that we have this grid over here. What we can do, which is kind of cool, is take a grid, and we know that it has 100 rows and 100 columns. Let's take a look at it. So we have our grid over here. We make it XY, and then we can scale it to match that. So if we want, we just scale it down. And there's lots of ways to do this. Like there's a ridiculous number of ways to do this. I'm just going to do it this way. You have it like that, and instead of transferring onto here, we can transfer onto this grid, right? And then we can actually just use an attribute copy. So this is what I find kind of cool, is because they have matching topology, you can copy that down onto the small grid, right? So this that's on the big grid gets copied down onto the small grid. Means we can make changes to this over here. So I'm going to make changes to things like frequency. So if you increase this, it increases the frequency, occurs more often. And this over here controls the height. So if you divide that by 5, it's about amplitude. So we can actually put a multiplier. So CHF, just call it amplitude. As you can see, it creates that for us. And then we can also create a CHF. And this one we can call frequency. Now we have 2, one for frequency, and this one will be a bigger value, right? Something like that. And then we can reduce that, right? So we have a lot of control now. And we can also change our distance threshold. And if you want, a good idea would be to copy your parameter from this, paste it over here, copy, oh, sorry, paste relative references. Now if we increase it, it still works. So we can have a nicer screen. And so always try to look for an efficiency thing. Right now, I see that it's a bad idea to recache this every time, because then it has to do this for each a whole bunch of times. So a better way to do that would actually be to put this for each further up. So you could do something a bit differently here. So we know that we have this attribute copy, and that works. We promote and we facet, right? So until this point, if anything changes, it's no big deal. This is all very quick to calculate. But once we reach this for each, it takes long to calculate. So a better way to do this would be to have this little facet thing going, but only do this once. So we facet over here, run this just once, And then we can do a copy, which is pretty cool. So an attribute copy. And now because it has the same geometry over here, it should work if we just attribute copy over the CD from here. And we could match by attribute if we want, so I'll just do that. Then all we have to do is put a little attribute wrangle over here with @id equals @ptnum, and one over here as well. And then match it by ID. Right, so now we have that. So now what's cool is it shouldn't take so long if we make any changes over here, right? So that's almost instant. Because it only has to calculate this left side once, and that means we can remove this over here. So it's only calculating this over here once. This chain over here is where all of the changes happen, and then all we have to do is copy it over at the end. And now we can play around with this, and it's instant. So now we can just work on this grid, because we know what it's going to look like. And I'm going to reverse this one as well. And I'm just going to mess around with some curves. So that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. Here is the end result. And I know you may be thinking, well, that's not very wavy for a wave day. And yeah, but I'm trying my best to be cognizant of cliche and try to do something a bit creative. So, maybe this one isn't very wavy, but I'm trying to challenge myself. And so this one seemed kind of cool. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.